Heather, I think we're ready to go.
Terrific. Thanks, Lane. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Turnbull, President of ACP International, and on behalf of our board directors, welcome to today's webinar. This is one of a series of professional development benefits through membership in our association, which of course is culminating in our global conference and 25th anniversary celebration in November of this year. Before I officially introduce today's speaker and topic, I'll ask Elaine Atkins to review some housekeeping items for our session. Elaine?
Thanks, Heather. So just to let everyone know, you might have been wondering, but you are on mute at the moment. If you do have a concern or the question for the moderator, please send it through the question section on your GoToWebinar dashboard. All of the questions regarding the presentation content will be held until the end, and then we will open for Q&A. And to let everyone know that this session is being recorded and it will be made available to members after the presentation. And during the Q&A, you can either, like I said, use the question section, or you can use the raise your hand feature. So without further delay, we will get the webinar started.
Okay, thanks, Lane. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, who is the Vice President for Habanero Consulting Incorporated, which for those of you who are based in Canada know that Habanero Consulting has been consistently one of the top-rated, most engaged, employee-engaged workforces and workplaces here in Canada. So it's a particular pleasure to welcome back Habanero Consulting to ACP International. Those of you who are familiar with our Toronto network, we had the real pleasure of two representations of this employee engagement success story of Habanero Consulting at our session in February of this year. And based on response to that, a number of our members globally wanted to hear more about it, and also from the perspective of a more strategic overview, which brings us to our presentation today from Caterina Sanders. I first met Caterina about 1.5 years ago through Your Workplace magazine, which our members receive as a benefit through ACP International. Your Workplace conference is a terrific opportunity for those who are involved with talent development and a whole range of HR interests to discuss strategies and opportunities to develop thriving workplaces. And I was impressed with Caterina's presentation in that although the work of Habanero Consulting is really around technology and collaborative applications, they are really about bringing people together for the purposes of enhanced communication and, of course, the celebration of talent. So in our presentation today, which will be interactive through some polling questions and some really interesting perspectives on career development, she's going to share how Habanero looks at careers, and especially within their workforce, which is populated by a lot of Gen Yers, Gen Xers, and actually it's very transgenerational, which is really quite fascinating. So over to you, Caterina. Welcome to ACP International and our global membership listening audience.
Thank you so much, Heather. That's a lovely introduction. So I'm just going to dive right in so that we can get through all the material and make sure we have time for questions. And so here we are to talk about some career development and performance management at Habanero. So just some very quick intros. You already have heard a bit about who I am, but basically, yeah, so I'm Vice President at Habanero. I've been with the organization since December of 2000. I started as a designer and have worn a variety of hats that have taken me through being more on the delivery side and then to where I am today, which is really heavily operations. So in my portfolio as Vice President, basically I'm responsible for employee experience as well as day-to-day operations. And one of the things that I've been working on over probably the last 7 years through, again, a variety of roles is our performance management framework. So that's what I'll be sharing with you today, obviously. So Habanero, who are we? We are passionate about helping people and organizations thrive. And how we bring that to life is we see that technology has a huge role to play in building thriving organizations and engaged workplaces. And so we are Canada's premier provider of enterprise-level employee, customer, and member portals. The customer and member portal side being tied, obviously, to highly engaged employees means much more engaged clients. So we feel like they're very complementary, these portal offerings. But we're here actually to get down into the nitty-gritty, and that's what we're going to do. So I've just divided it into two parts. I'm going to talk about our performance management framework, and then hopefully give you some very hands-on tools that you can take away and make use of right after this webinar. Okay, so without any further delay, the framework that we have. Okay, what I'm going to show you right now is this slide is actually taken from one of our orientations that we do with new HABs. And this is how I like to explain performance management to folks when they've joined us. And essentially, there's your performance manager who is there to help you with a block of things around defining your performance expectations and helping you get feedback. Then there's also a block around increasing self-awareness and understanding your strengths and your capabilities and your potential. And then a performance manager helps with the development and application of knowledge, skills, and competencies. That ultimately the goal is that every individual at Habanero is feeling like they're responsible for their career development and their career management. They have a performance manager who is there to really help them with that. But what we're seeking to drive is this sense of an internal responsibility for this, because that ties into a bunch of concepts that I will actually be diving into shortly around this motivation that needs to come from within. So this is how we explain it to our folks. So the concepts that are the underpinning to this are as follows. So the very first concept that I'd like to introduce, and what we introduce to our people, is this concept of a performance manager. And I put manager in quotes because it really is tough, because performance manager as a title does have a lot of pre-existing connotations. Not all of them super positive. We don't consider our performance managers to be managers. In fact, they're not people's bosses. So the very first piece, the very first bullet you see there is, it's about establishing unique coaching experiences. So our performance managers very much are tasked with being coaches, first and foremost, because that is how you're going to get the most powerful experience for people who are on their sort of career development journey. We also believe in our performance managers showing up in equal parts support and challenge. That's partly why I really like thinking about them as coaches, because a great coach doesn't just sit back and hammer on you, nor do they sit back and just pat you on the back and say, hey, good job. There really is equal parts of that support and challenge that I think is super critical. Great performance managers help create an atmosphere of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And this is something I'll come back to again. It's very, very foundational to how we view career development. So more to come on that. And our performance managers are selected based on their ability to coach, not on tenure. It's not that we take somebody who's been with us for 10 years and they need a new challenge, so let's have them performance manage a bunch of people. Nor is it that we would take a developer and the most senior developer then becomes the performance manager for other developers. We select people apply for performance manager roles based on their orientation and interest in being coaches. And lastly, the role of a performance manager, feedback is a huge part of this, and I will speak more on feedback or the term actually that we use based on Marshall Goldsmith, which is feed forward, which might be familiar to some of you already. Okay, so that's the role of the performance manager. Now if we look at performance management itself, we see this as being made up of three parts: motivation, strengths, and the power of context. So let's look at motivation first. Okay, so I'm indebted heavily to Daniel Pink for creating this book called Drive. And I think actually right here is a good spot for us to do our first quick poll. And I'm just curious who in the audience has either heard or read, heard of or read Daniel Pink's book Drive. So I'll switch it over to Lane.
Yep, everyone should be able to see the poll. So we are just getting in responses now. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes, well, seconds, I guess. Okay, everyone, last call. I'm going to close the poll now.
Let's see, we've got basically...
So, there's the results for you.
Okay.
Can you see the results?
I actually can't see the results.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Sorry. So 13% said, yes, I've read it, 50% no, never heard of it, and 38% sort of.
Okay, well, I definitely, I've been in the towering nightstand of books. I would suggest to the 38% who have it on your nightstand, maybe move it up in the queue a little bit. It's a really excellent exploration of motivation, and basically these three areas that are most tied to it. So autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I'm going to jump into that into a little more detail. So in fact, maybe those of you who haven't read it yet but plan on it, maybe this is your cold notes version and you don't have to move it up in the queue. We'll see. Okay, autonomy, the desire to direct our own lives. So in a performance management context, or a management context even, you could look at more traditional management, which is a sort of controlling style that assumes that people are passive and inert, and that unless you prod them, you will not get performance from them. This concept on autonomy is that it actually assumes that people are active, and they're looking for interesting work, and they're curious, and they're self-engaging. And so if you can tap into an autonomous motivation, there is data to show that you will promote greater conceptual understanding, you will generate higher productivity, you will see less burnout, and you will see greater levels of psychological well-being. People who have a sense of autonomy feel like they're in control. And actually, I should rephrase that. It's not that they feel like they're in control. They are in control, and that's a very powerful thing. So practically speaking, through performance management, you need to establish expectations of what good performance is. You need to establish measures, or rather the individual needs to establish those measures because they understand those expectations so well, they feel comfortable doing that. And then that way people know what they're trying to accomplish, and you can leave the how to them. So that's autonomy. On the mastery side, it's the urge to get better and better at something that matters. And so it's a mindset, in that either you believe you can get better or you don't believe that you can get better. So that's maybe one thing the first step in performance management or coaching is, to establish this feeling of this mindset of mastery. The piece about mastery is that it is a pain because it involves not only working harder but longer at the same thing. So, it's never, mastery generally doesn't come with an end point. I think most people who start on a path of mastery will tell you when they've been at something for many years, it's only now they realize how little they know and how much there is more to do. But that sense that they are getting better just feeds that drive to take it to that outer limit. And so related to that then, fancy word here, but mastery is an asymptote, which means that it's a straight line that you can come close to but never reach. So you're never going to get a tick mark on mastery, and yet it's sort of this perversely, highly motivating thing to want to get better. So then the last one is purpose. So purpose is the yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves. And so for us, we look at purpose as providing context for autonomy and mastery. And basically, you want to give people this understanding of what's the sandbox. And inside of this sandbox, how can you pursue mastery? And also, where does your autonomy what are its limits, essentially? So again, in practical terms, it's the why we're doing what we're doing, and what the big picture is, and how people are contributing to it. So I will talk more about this in detail. And so I would like to actually just do one more quick poll here. So this is basically our organizational purpose. We have it front and center, and it's something that was quite a journey for us to get here, but now we know it, and that's great. So I guess the piece and purpose is you need to fundamentally get to a place that you know what sort of an organization that you are or that you want to be. You want to be authentic, and you want to be clear about it. And so to that end, here's my question for you guys, which is, do you feel that you're clear on the purpose of your organization, or maybe multiple organizations if you're perhaps a coach working for various clients? But is the purpose of those organizations, is it clear to you?
Okay, so I've just opened the poll. I'm just going to give everyone a second to just answer. Okay, so we're going to close the poll now. Okay, so let me share the results. So 71% said yes, and it's meaningful. 29% said yes, but it's generic and heavy on hot air, and 0% said not at all clear.
That's fantastic. So that's huge. I suspect it's partly also this audience is pretty oriented towards digging into what is the why and what is our purpose. And the fact that so many of you say it's there and it's meaningful is fantastic, because then you have a very strong foundation from which to help people connect with that purpose and, in that sense, drive their motivation. Okay, so that's motivation. Let's talk about strengths, which would probably also be something that really resonates with this audience. Okay, so strengths. What are they and how to leverage them? So here, another set of books that I have to give credit to, and these are by Marcus Buckingham. The very first book, First Break All the Rules, I think is probably what set us on this path around really taking strengths to heart. And for those of you who are familiar with these books, that's great. For those of you that aren't, the first two are probably quite a lot around management styles. And it's the third book that really gets into, so what are these strengths and how do we, define them? So I would recommend book 1 and 3, I guess, if you're pressed for time. Certainly read the whole series if you want to, but 1 and 3 are probably the nitty-gritty. Another option would be to go to this site here, strengthsfinder.com. StrengthsFinder 1.0 was first introduced in Now Discover Your Strengths, which was book 2 of the series I just showed you. They're now currently on StrengthsFinder 2.0. You can buy the book, you can get the Kindle version. The Kindle version will give you an online test and a detailed report that comes out of it. We use this with our new hires just as a way for them to start on this journey of understanding their strengths and to work with a performance manager on this as kind of a shared learning piece between them. So, so about strengths, I'm going to do one more poll with you guys, and that is, what do you think about this statement? So the statement is, anyone can be anything they want to be if they just try hard enough. Fact or fiction?
Okay, the poll's been launched. Give everyone a second. All right, we're going to close the poll now. So the results, 25% fact and 75% fiction.
Oh, gold star. So yes, anyone can be anything they want to be if you just try hard enough. And the strengths movement, for sure, they would say, no, not really. So strengths-based career development is based on the idea that that this is fiction, because as the argument goes, they would say, if you were to set out on a career that you've picked for yourself, or who knows, maybe your parents have picked for you, you could be very good at it, and you could get maybe some of the trappings of being well paid, maybe getting a lot of ego satisfaction from it. But if you're not playing to your strengths, all of those other external things will ultimately not really feed and nurture you, and you will eventually find yourself getting frustrated, anxious, exhausted, unmotivated, all that good stuff, and it doesn't matter how well compensated you are or how much acclaim you have for yourself. And so they very much believe you got to get into the zone, play to your strengths, because that is what will nourish you. And so a very related concept to that is this one of self-actualization based on Maslow's work. And Maslow is quite a prominent figure in the area of positive psychology as well. The concept there is, why in psychology do we study people who are not normal, people who are dysfunctional? All that teaches us is what dysfunction looks like. Whereas, why don't we study people who are functional, who are happy, who are normal, quote unquote, because we can learn how to emulate them and be on that path rather than avoiding dysfunction. There's this idea then of seeking out self-actualization, which you can kind of squint at that and see how closely tied that would be to the concept of playing to your strengths. So in a nutshell, strengths. These are behaviors that someone finds themselves doing often. There's actually often recurring patterns of behavior that help you realize that this is probably a strength of mine. Some people use the word talent synonymously with strengths. So strengths or talents. You cannot develop new strengths, but you can discover hidden ones. So which is, I'd say, almost as good as. So basically, the knowledge of what you may have as a talent or a strength, and that you can work on those to improve them, and that's sort of a safe bet. That's a very powerful thing. There's also this idea that strengths are not necessarily something someone is good at. A little bit like the last example I said, right? So somebody who really dedicates themselves to becoming a lawyer, let's say, they can be a very competent, excellent lawyer. If it's not playing to their strengths, that you don't get that motivation from it, and nor do you find it energizing. And then also strengths are multifaceted. And so to that piece, it's one of those things that you really want to take some time as you're defining your strengths to not sort of stop at the first level, if you will. So a strength of mine is I love to solve problems. Okay, well, what kind of problems? In what context? Marcus Buckingham tells a great story of where he decided he was going to become a life coach, that was his love and his passion, and so he did become a life coach and very quickly found that he hated it. And what he dug into was his strength was not being a coach. His strength was being a coach to people who were already doing well but wanted to really do much better. And what he found was he was currently coaching a lot of people who were just plain struggling. And that was not energizing him, nor was it nourishing him. But when he was able to dig into that deeper layer, the multifaceted view of being a coach, and understanding specifically he needed to seek out people who were trying to go from good to great, then he lit up. So then the last piece would be that people, of course, have weaknesses, and those need to be managed. And so a really interesting view of this is if you have your child who comes home with a report card and they have a C in math and an A in English. Well, most of us would say, all right, well, English clearly you've got a handle on, so let's leave English alone. We've got to work on your math. Strengths-based would say, you know what, a C in math, they're not failing. Maybe you want to get them a little extra help or a tutor so that they don't slip into a failing grade. But really where you want to be applying your efforts is in the English side of it. And that as time goes on, they would find ways to manage around areas where they need their math skills, but they would be so strong in English that that's where they would be spending most of their time. And it would kind of help overshadow that weakness in math. So, helping someone get clear on their strengths. Another side benefit of this that I don't have on the slide is, though, it can give them much more confidence and an ability to talk about themselves and helps them get into the why they do what they do and not just the what. And so that's always helpful. So helping people ground themselves in their strengths to build off of that, it's a great touchstone. It's something that it will remain with you through life. So establish what your strengths are, spend time on that, and you'll find you can generate more and more rewards from it. You know, it's a way to get in the zone, and we all know how fantastic it can feel when you're in flow. And then also, there's no need to wait. It's not that, you know, hey, let's work on your strengths later. It's no, let's do this right away. There's nothing stopping us or holding us back. You can do it at any time. So it doesn't have to be, oh, well, let's do it when you're, you know, going after that promotion or there's a role transition. No, anytime. Okay, so now I'm just going to give us a chance to do a really quick and dirty exercise here. So if you've got a piece of paper and a pen, just maybe grab that and pull it close. So a little do-it-yourself here. So as I mentioned, the three Marcus Buckingham books, the very last one, Go Put Your Strengths to Work, he describes in greater detail this exercise. So I've taken it and I'm just, like I said, the quick and dirty version of it, but I just want to throw it out there because I think this might be kind of a fun exercise for ourselves, but also some quick practice on how we might do this with someone that we're working with. So basically, consider the following. So there's a lot of writing up here. I'll just kind of read through it, but try and sort of close your eyes and have a think on, when did you last feel like you were in the zone at work? So let's say maybe in the last week. We won't make it too broad, but in the last week, and you felt like you were in the zone. So you felt energized, you felt excited, you were thinking to yourself, wow, when can I do this again? Now, what was that thing? What was the nature of that work or task? What was the nature of the team? Was it a team? Or, you know, maybe you were doing this on your own. Did it have a tight timeline, or did you have all the time you needed? Did you initiate this task, or did someone ask you to do it? Is it consistent that you feel great when you do this sort of work? If you now say, okay, that was in the past week, and I did this thing, and it was awesome. The last time I did it, did I feel that way? Was it as awesome? Are you surprised that right now this thing that popped into your head is the thing that you're considering? Or is it like, yeah, no, I know. Do you think a year from now you'll still feel this way about this particular activity? So if you do this same task a year from now, do you think you'll feel it was just as awesome? This is a few of an infinite number kinds of refinement questions you can ask. But basically, what it does is that task that you felt you were in the zone, you want to dissect the hell out of it and suck the juice from it and see what you can learn from that task that will give you a hint, that will give you direction as to a strength or maybe a few strengths that are all coming into play when you do this one activity. So, so this is about, like I said, just a quick and dirty for you guys to have a think about. And there is a much longer, it involves keeping a journal and taking notes throughout a week of, you know, when do you feel energized, when do you not feel energized, and at the end of that week you've got some really interesting data to look at in terms of when you were maybe playing to your strengths and you were in the zone. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour of strengths. So the last place I would like to chat about is context. And so what do I have to say about context? So what's the sandbox in which your career development can take place? So really I'm talking about organizational context, right? So it's super critical that people understand where and how they can develop their career. So in our organization, right, we're technology consultants. If someone's interested in a piece of technology that we don't really work with, then they can have all the autonomy, mastery, and purpose that they wish, but they need to understand that if they're dedicating all their time to an area of the business that we're not actively pursuing, there's only so far that can go. And getting into that kind of a conversation as open and honestly as possible is really healthy, and it can either a person redirect, or they decide, no, I really do need to explore this in order to feel whole, in order to feel self-actualized. And then it's a very natural place where paths diverge. More practically speaking, one thing that we use is balanced scorecard reviews. So we have a balanced scorecard that we apply to our business. We review it with the entire organization once a month, including our profit and loss statement, and that's another way that we establish context for people to understand, you know, what are we trying to do as an organization and where they can apply their efforts in order to offer the most value back to the organization. So it's around this idea of people understanding the ecosystems in which they play, right? So there's the ecosystem of the teams they're on, the departments they're part of, the divisions they're part of, and the entire company. And those are all, that's all context that they really should understand. And they need to understand strategies and goals and measures across all of those different facets. So one other concept that we like to use is that I mentioned is how can people provide the most value. So we have a value with a really lame name called the value-focused value, but let's not dwell on that too badly. But really, this is how we kind of view the universe, which is there's what's best for our clients, what's best for employees, and what's best for Habanero. And by Habanero, I mean kind of the corporate entity, mostly the financial side of it. How are we profitable? And what we seek is that sweet spot. And so if people can understand that, their efforts, as much as they can align them into that sweet spot, you're really interested in X, and that's a huge boon to our clients, and it's great for Habanero, and obviously it's great for your career development. Those are the win-wins that we're actively seeking all the time. Okay, so that's a lot of framework and concepts. So now I'd like to just transition into a bit more hands-on tools and takeaways. So let's start with the first, which would be accountability agreements. So we use accountability agreements extensively. Everyone here has one. They are a really helpful tool for us to establish a bunch of those earlier things I was talking about, mostly expectations and measures for success. So just on the idea of accountability, to be clear, you can take responsibility, but you are held accountable. So the distinction being responsible is very you-focused. I feel responsible to do X. When you're accountable for something, it's hitting on the fact that people are observing, and they are going to be making assumptions and perceptions of your actions. And so it's all great that you feel really responsible to show up or to deliver on X. But really, there is an element of this that if you're accountable, you've got to make sure that the other people around you understand what's going on in your head so that they can see what you're doing and how you're trying to be successful. So accountabilities, they represent a promise and an obligation on both sides. So if somebody is accountable for something, that's great, but they need to be supported in meeting those accountabilities in order to deliver specific, defined results. So accountability agreements, from that standpoint, the way I just described it, they are not job descriptions. So it's not that you just go and list that, yeah, you have this is what you're accountable for, et cetera, et cetera. There is a structure to this, and it is, again, another book we have to give credit to. It's called Accountability, Getting a Grip on Results. This book is an interesting one, a bit challenging to find. It kind of seems to go in and out of print, depending on, I don't know what factors. So if you do have a look for it, you might find it on Amazon for like $60 if it's out of print, or you might find it for something very reasonable, like $15 if it is in print. So as I said, it's a bit variable, but I'll give my email address at the end of this if you want to reach out, and maybe I can find a copy lying around here or something. Okay, so accountability agreements are made up of, obviously, you've got to define accountabilities. You've got to specifically be explicit around the available supports that are required. What are measures and goals of success? What are the consequences of meeting those goals? And consequences is their term. You almost always, when you hear the word consequences, you think negative consequences, but the way they use it, they see that there are positive and negative consequences to meeting your accountabilities. So, positive ones being obviously more recognition, more responsibility, salary increases, all that good stuff. So that's the structure of the accountability agreement. And how do you have meaningful accountability agreements? Because it's easy to get really hung up on the document and going through a template, and that really is the fastest way to kill something like this. What you need to do is you need to take the time to help people get clear on their strengths so that that's a real foundation to this accountability agreement so that they can stand up and take on accountabilities that they know are well aligned with them. So then they need to get clear on those accountabilities. And one lesson we've learned is as an organization, we're very good at holding people accountable for behaviors, but not necessarily results. And what that means is, let's say somebody is accountable for, I don't know, a revenue target. We're really good at saying, you don't seem to be out in the market enough, or, what are the activities you're doing to reach that revenue target? But then when they do all of those activities and they don't get the expected results, we back off because we're very sympathetic, and it's like, well, what can you do? I mean, you were working with that client, the project fell through, totally get that. But the fact is, you can't actually, it's unsatisfying to an individual who is continuously doing all what looks like the right efforts but not getting the right results. And it requires a diligence to dig into that and say, you know what, it's not okay that you're not getting the results. This isn't like, now we're going to browbeat you. We need to dig into why you're not getting the results, because chances are we're actually not engaging in the right behaviors. So that's been kind of an interesting nuance for us around accountabilities and that distinction that it needs to be behavior and results. You obviously need to get super clear on the supports that they need in order to meet their accountabilities. Well, that's great you've given me a revenue target, but you also expect me to be billing, I don't know, whatever, 90% of my time. We don't have those expectations, but just as an example, you can't ask somebody to be billing 90% of the time and hit a bunch of revenue targets. That they are not being supported in meeting their goals. And then the last piece is use real language. I really encourage everyone here, if they want to use, we do have a template, it's a Word document for an accountability agreement, and if they want to use that and that feels like a good way to capture their thoughts, fantastic. But if they would rather do a mind map, if they would rather do an exercise of throwing up a bunch of stickies on the wall and take photographs, if they would rather do a sketch, an infographic, you name it, that's what I would want. It needs to be in real language that a person really owns, understands. It's not a bunch of boilerplate that they just skim over that just feels like a blah blah, because then you don't actually get at the power of an accountability agreement, because it's not that things feel well-defined, expectations aren't clear, measures are not smart, all that good stuff. So it needs to be in real language, or maybe even a better way of putting that is a meaningful format to the individuals who are engaging in that discussion. Okay, communication is another sort of main tool heading, if you will. And around that, there's this idea of feed forward. As I already mentioned, Marshall Goldsmith, there's a URL to find out more about him, but just Google Marshall Goldsmith feed forward and you'll find a ton of stuff. His idea is focus on the promise of the future rather than the mistakes of the past. So at its most distilled, it's this idea that with feed forward, you're giving people suggestions on how they could do better next time. That's based, obviously, on your observations of what they did the last time. But just focusing on, that interaction I just saw you have with the clients, I think you want to, there was this point where you could have done this, or that can feel judgmental. It can put a person in a defensive state. Whereas when you phrase it literally as, the next time you're meeting with a client, maybe you want to think about doing these things, you might get these results, et cetera, et cetera. It could be a powerful way to help someone move forward through something that they're currently blocked with. So feed forward is one kind of communication tool. Another one is just the skill of having a difficult conversation. Again, giving credit where credit's due. This is a book, Crucial Conversations by Ron McMillan. I heard him speak a couple years ago at a conference. He has a really nice sort of framework for kind of dealing with difficult conversations. Here it is, cold notes. Get your head right. What's the outcome you're really looking for? If you're disguising one discussion as another, you got to be honest with yourself, and you need to go in there and you need to really be, dialed into here's really what the outcome I want to get out of this. You need to get your heart right. Maybe you're going into this with some assumptions. To take a really trivial example, but let's say you need to talk to somebody about the fact that they're always on their phone in a meeting. And it's been happening these last couple weeks, and clients are noticing it, the team is noticing it, it's a real problem. Well, you're going in there with the assumption that the person maybe is not interested, not paying attention, who knows. You need to check that and say, I think that's an assumption, because it's possible that the person is dealing with some sort of, I don't know, major personal issue, medical issue. They're on their phone because they're waiting to get test results. There are conceivably scenarios where their behavior of being on the phone is excusable. So you can't go in having already made up your mind that they're doing it because they're, you know, they're a poor employee. Okay, make it safe. Establish your good intentions up front, which if you've gotten your head and heart right, you can do that. Describe the gap, which is, you know, when you're bringing up something that they've done and you want to like deal with it, you know, compare what you expected with what you observed, and of course always talking about behavior, not attitudes, that you've observed. And then finally, diagnose. So end it with a question and really listen to what the person has to say. Anyway, like I said, that's the super Coles Notes version. Ron McMillan is the author, and if you Google him, you might even find some YouTube material rather than reading the book. And then the last tool would be learning plans. And so this is just a process that we use that helps us incorporate informal and formal learning, 4 steps. Basically, past learning reflection, which is, you know, help a person think about what are the previous learning experiences that have been really effective. The next would be identifying learning needs. So, you know, what are their career and personal, if applicable, their goals. Give some thought to timelines, like milestones. And so, you know, like what do you need to learn in order to meet your XY goal? And based on your previous learning experiences, how should we go about accomplishing this? Then step 3 would be, you know, map their learning network. So who could they draw on? Are there internal experts, managers, leaders, whatever, that they wanted to connect with? Maybe it's external. Do they have coaches, social networks, community groups, courses, family, friends, you name it. Who's out there externally that they could draw on? And you just want to get explicit about this, because then they kind of have this very tangible thing they can use to walk through and take action. And then lastly, step 4, create the personal learning plan. You know, obvious things here like creating SMART learning goals for each learning need and some measurements. Ideally, some of those goals would then be having the person share what they've learned with other people in the organization so that you kind of maybe can grow and leverage the investment that they've made to learn a certain thing. Other people can benefit from that. Okay, so really, that's kind of what I have for you today. So we've gone through the performance management framework. We've done a review of the tools, like accountability agreements, communication tools, and learning plans. And really, then the last thing would be for us to see if there's any questions that I might be able to answer for you.
Thank you, Kat. This is Heather Turnbull. On behalf of our listeners today, I have to say, wow, so comprehensive. We wish that all of our clients could be implementing even a fraction of what you're doing. I have made a number of comments and have some questions that have come out of everything that you've shared, from your models and framework right through to how you've accumulated a veritable who's who of motivation and intention and behavioral support from all of the names that, of course, are very familiar for career practitioners, as we use them a lot in our practice. Just while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, an earlier one that we had was around qualifications, particularly ICF and others, for those in your organization, Caterina, who are doing career coaching or this kind of work in support of your framework. Is that a requisite for doing this work, or do you have an opinion on certifications around professional designations for this kind of work?
My opinion is that I'm very I'm outcome driven, and so if exactly in the same way that I was talking about people's performance management and setting expectations, when we select a performance manager, it's about setting expectations. It's about explaining, here are the results we would expect from you, in terms of the people you'd be working with and the kind of career development that we would want to see those people experience. If an individual then comes back and says, I still feel like I would love to do this, but I don't have the confidence in my coaching abilities, I would really love to go and get certification, take courses, learn more so that I can be even more effective in this, I would wholeheartedly support that. Our experience so far has been that we're sort of doing it a bit organically. It's a bit homegrown. We rely a lot on like the books, for instance, that I've listed. There's still quite a number more that we look at. And folks so far have been pretty happy and comfortable to do a bit of self-study in those areas and get their coaching skills up that way. On my to-do list is to create a bit of a boot camp. To sort of distill a lot of what we've learned and create something that would be quite consumable and do some sort of active learning and development with our coaches as well as our coaches-to-be in order to get their skills up. So I'd say if we're on a continuum of mastery here, I think we've got a lot of folks who have a lot of innate talent and ability, but I don't think that we've formalized it yet, going the route of certification. But I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. I think there's a lot to be gained, obviously, by going that route. We just haven't gone there yet.
Thank you. I think that's one of the overarching considerations when one engages with career professionals is around certification, and it's a topic of considerable interest across North America, if not the world, and that's standard, I think, that we're all working for. Will have particular implication around consumer awareness of what it is that career professionals do internally as well as externally with organizations and individuals. One of the questions that I had, and again, I'd encourage our listeners today to type in the questions if you have access to the dashboard within the GoToWebinar application. One of the questions I had was around culture and the diversity that you have within generations in your current workforce, Caterina. You really encourage plain language, which appeals to a variety of learners, especially around your accountability agreements and overall emphasis on people, showing up authentically and making a full contribution. I'm just interested to know, how does that play out with your, first of all, your culturally diverse workforce?
Well, I have to say, for me, the concepts that I presented today are the lowest common denominator. So cultural diversity is a factor, yes, but fundamentally I have so far found it doesn't matter a person's background or their generation, for that matter. There is a unifying theme around autonomy, mastery, purpose that really unites everyone. Where perhaps cultural or generational differences emerge will be in sort of the layer above that, in the areas maybe that somebody chooses to express their autonomy or the kind of purpose that they can really connect with or what mastery feels like to them. That's where I think you start to see differences and nuances. But as bedrock, I haven't found autonomy, mastery, and purpose to really vary very much between any noticeable demographic groups.
Interesting. I expect that's a reflection of the culture that's been developed within Habanero, probably from its inception, which leads me to another question. Who drove this kind of approach within your organization?
Pretty organic, I have to say. Stephen and Neil, who started Habanero, they started it with a point of view that they wanted to create an organization that they would want to work for. They just kind of instilled that kind of quietly in everybody. And so over the years, as the company's grown, as we've had to get a little bit more established and formal, sort of the next layer then there were three of us who played group lead roles. And those group leads, we had three groups. We had, engineering, project managers and user experience. And as group leads, we were responsible for both the kind of nurturing, coaching, performance management, all the, call it HRE type stuff, as well as operationally, how do we have the best processes and the highest quality solutions. So that period of time with the 3 group leads, I think we did a lot of work in kind of starting to define these concepts. It's always been a passion of Stephen's as well. I mean, a good number of these books that I've talked about, he introduced me to them. And so I'd say we kind of burbled along in that organic fashion, shaping our culture, shaping our performance management practices. And then, maybe 4 years ago, I took on the role of Director of Employee Experience. And it was the first time we'd ever really kind of just unified. We disbanded the groups. We no longer had group leads. We went for an even flatter structure, fewer silos. And so the benefit of having something roll up to one person was, now I was able to kind of give this a little bit more structure, start to create artifacts, ways to talk about it and explain it to where we are today, which now it's really something that we just can evolve. And when someone starts to emerge as having a real passion around this, as part of my own kind of succession planning, I would definitely be looking to encourage them in that, and we may then have a Director of Employee Experience again rather than a VP with a couple things, and we'll see the culture then probably take another step forward in its evolution.
Thank you. It's truly an evolutionary as well as revolutionary approach, I think, and
yes.
very much in keeping with your flat-styled organization. Here's a hypothetical question. Knowing what you do know now about what career professionals do, what impact do you think that role might have played in either accelerating where you are now or just more richly informing either the framework or some of the practices that you have around either employee engagement or our sort of career navigation?
Yeah, I mean, as consultants, we're big believers in, outsourcing, seeking out professionals. They're people who do things for livings that you just can't know. So how would a career professional have impacted our organization? At a key juncture, if we had connected with someone who, rather than us maybe stumbling over 2-3 years of just slowly piecing together this framework, I think a career professional, coaching professional would come in and we would have gotten from A to B that much faster. And I think there is definitely still room for us to go that route. We're still a small business and we still have, I would have to say, competing priorities for where we invest time and money. And right now, knock on wood, we're getting really good feedback that where we've taken our career development is a place that people really appreciate and are getting a lot out of and are very engaged with. But by no means are we planning on sitting on our laurels. So I would definitely see that in the future that would be a way for us to do exactly that. Maybe give ourselves a bit of a jump start. Work with someone who is leading edge, I would say. And in looking at what could we do to really amp up our performance management practices. So yeah, I think there's definitely huge applications for people with that skill set within our organization in the future, but certainly there would have been application in the past.
I appreciate that, because as an unregulated industry, we're always challenged with articulating the value proposition of what we offer. A number of our members historically have come out of organizational work and have a really interesting perspective on how to architect, deploy, and really kickstart a number of the initiatives that small to medium-sized enterprises are going through, which is, of course, the backbone of a lot of North American industry. So I appreciate that perspective. And of course, that ties in with the theme of our conference later this year, which is called Valuing Connections and Careers. Speaking about time and resources, that's always put up as a bit of a barrier for us in terms of investing in career services for organizations. Most recently, Environics did a national poll here in Canada with Canadian organizations and asked just of those surveyed who would invest in career services, who actually does. And if you're not currently investing in career-related services, why not? And time and resources or expertise were certainly raised as issues. Is there from your perspective, Caterina, is there a shorthand or is there a way in which career services providers, practitioners can make their case more keenly felt with organizations that are emerging? Because there's that tipping point, isn't there, between, we're not really large enough to have a full-time person doing this in an organization, but clearly there's, a business case, some bottom line impacts that can be realized by companies who, as it's been proved in a lot of engagement surveys, regularly use career-related services.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to say a couple perhaps inflammatory things. So one, being a technology consulting firm, I think what sets us apart is that we really believe that technology is secondary to more cultural, process, human-related considerations. So you've got a business outcome that you're going after. So many organizations jump to the technology piece and say, oh, well, then we need a blah, blah system in order to do that. Right now, it's really interesting because what I'm seeing a bunch of kind of HR professionals get, I think, a bit mired in is the discussion of bringing in-house performance management systems. Mm-hmm. They're getting a little hung up on how do we track and store reviews and, somewhere that people can find the discussions that have happened. And I think they're really missing the point because they're willing to invest in that technology, and yet I think they've missed out on all of those foundational elements that I've just been talking about. And so this is my long answer to your question, but I think that sort of career coaching professionals, if they can find a way to get into a conversation that says, look, don't go out and buy some sort of, technology system that perhaps your HR department is saying they absolutely need to have because otherwise they can't do good career development. Instead, take the time, bring in a professional, perhaps do some train the trainer, and start to get the people who you have earmarked as performance managers, get them out of the old school, I'm your boss, we do a review once a year, I can't give you 5 out of 5 because I never give out 5. Get them out of that and use a career professional to really do that heavy lifting of changing the mentality. And I believe they'll see a much stronger ROI in investing in a career professional than they will to go the route of let's get in yet another technology solution that's going to help us administer human resources better. So, I realize that I'm sort of dripping. My voice is dripping with some contempt here, and it's not fair because there are so many people in the HR industry that are trying so hard to bring it back to let's talk about people. Yeah. But you did ask the question, and I do see that as an area where companies are spending money that they really should reconsider as part of really truly moving their organization forward to being an engaged workplace.
Well, I appreciate your candor in that, especially coming from a technology background.
Yes.
And that's really bold, and we appreciate that at ACP International. The irony of all of that is that HR has really not evolved much at all, and there's an inordinate amount of money and time expended on replicating old models. Yes. So we're really out of time with a lot of the processes that we have in support of people in the workplace. I mean, everything has changed when you look at even technology changing within the last 2 years. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and we really haven't seen anything to mirror that or map that out adequately. So, again, based on your experience, which is really great lived experience that's monitored and certainly, I'm sure, is evaluated financially and in other ways, because you certainly use a lot of models, I appreciate, in your organization to do that. It is important that as individuals working with clients that we can come to bear with that kind of evidence, that yet another process isn't going to answer the current needs that you have for onboarding, for integrating people, for retaining really good talent. Yeah. Interesting sidebar, as you may be aware, Caterina, and some of our listeners today, ASTD, or the American Society for Training and Development, has just announced in the last couple of weeks a huge change in their direction, including their name. They are now calling themselves the Association for Talent Development, which is a absolutely massive change in thinking and approach. And I think that ushers in a whole different time where what it is that we do in our profession needs to be very clearly articulated. So if you think about that, Caterina, it's all hovering around the talent piece. And so less, I think, on nomenclature like training development and all the angst that training and development people have gone through for hundreds of years on measuring their impact and worth. Yes. What do you think that means? Because that ASTD is just a massive organization, and they've dropped the term American and they've dropped the term training.
You know, I mean, it's hard to maintain, I think, an objective view of this when you kind of get into the center of it. So, you know, being so close to the area of engaged workplaces, it feels to me so like the case has been made, and it's just so obvious that an engaged workplace is good business. So when I see a really large organization make a bold change like what you've just described, to me it feels like this wave is really now starting to hit mainstream, that more and more organizations, I think, are going to be at least philosophically aligned with looking at their people as people, not as resources, not as, I don't know, cost centers, not as burdens, but you know, I think every organization is on the doorstep of understanding if you don't have good people, you don't have anything. And so I get hugely encouraged when I hear of those sorts of moves by large established players in this space, because it makes me think, you know, maybe we really have turned a corner here on understanding the way that this needs to roll. And you know, there's so many news items about the Zappos of the world and the really like those high watermarks of what a great engaged workplace can be. So I think that it's very encouraging, but again, I say it's a philosophical change. I think when it really comes down to it, there's still a lot of entrenched processes and beliefs that's where the challenge is going to lie, is how do you now go in and revamp an HR department at a large established organization and kind of get them away from being administrators and bureaucrats and really truly in the business of talent development. But again, I'm hugely encouraged because that argument's been coming out of HR for a long time now under the heading of how can HR be more strategic. So they also, they understand that they've been pushed in a corner and kind of ghettoized, and that there are ways for them to really play a much stronger role in their organization. So it would seem things are coming together quite nicely right now.
Yeah, I think a number of us see it optimistically, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot of legacy hardware, so to speak, in place, as well as legacy thinking that will take a while before it really gets kind of purged from the system, and we get really focused again on talent and what it really means to all the bottom lines of organizations, human and otherwise. Yes. Just before we wrap up and we do some final announcements. Kat, do you have some final comments or observations from today, just in summation?
I guess I'm just going to repeat myself, but and it is tough because this audience, you guys already, you know this. Let's do what we can to get this back into the realm of we're working with people, individuals. Let's not get hung up on sweeping demographic statements. Let's not get hung up on administration, bureaucracy. Let's just get back to we're working with people. They're individuals. They have individual needs. And with taking a bit of time and care to establish a strong foundation, to communicate that foundation so everybody's on the same page, it's really quite staggering the kinds of careers that people could have in today's workplaces. It's in our grasp. Let's just keep fighting the good fight, because it really we're doing something momentous here when you consider how much time every individual spends in the workplace. To transform that into a self-actualizing experience, that's phenomenal.
Well, that's both wise and inspirational. We do have a couple of additional questions that our listeners today have put forward. The first one relates to, how would you suggest, Caterina, a new manager approaches an employee who has had some poor reviews and there's a real need for more of an accountability approach? Say that this is sort of the last chance opportunity for this employee.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if the organization is okay with it, I would approach them in all honesty, and I would just kind of have a review of this has been your career track so far. These are the results that we've seen. This is the kind of performance you've shown. If we carry on like this, there's really only one way it's going to go. And do you want it to end that way, or do you really want to kind of put your shoulder into jump-starting your career? Because if you do, we will support you, and we will do what it takes to help you with that. But you have to want this. We're not gonna take you by the hand and put you through hoops and make you take courses. You need to be driving this, and if you're willing to drive it, then we're behind you. And if you're not, then let's just call it. You know, if you're unhappy, you're disengaged, you've been working in the wrong area for too long, let's just be open about that, and let's just go with it. And the reason why I say if the organization is okay with it is because really what you're probably looking at is this a person that people are okay with packaging out, or is the mandate in your organization that no, we don't package anybody, we need to create a file that is 3 years in length, documenting every single conversation that we've had so that we can eventually let this person go and not actually have to pay them anything. So personally, I prefer to just cut quickly, give the person a package, and just move on.
Thank you. And we have a final question, kind of two-pronged. This is more on the practical side of the individuals who are doing coaching in your organization. Are they also doing consulting work? And if so, what kind of timelines would they be looking at in terms of, say, deploying X or percentage amount of time on coaching activities, and how many people would they coach at any one time?
Yes. Okay. Well, we made a decision, perhaps arbitrarily, but we're hanging in there because it feels right, where every single one of our performance managers works with a maximum of 5 people. And so what that means is, and you can do the math, I mean, if there's about 80 of us, we have quite a few performance managers. But what it means as well is that it is a bit more distributed. And roughly speaking, we expect every performance manager is going to have probably an hour to 2 hours a month of coaching with each person that they work with. And that can take whatever form works for them. Some people love having, quick 10-minute check-ins a lot. Others are happy to just check in for an hour once a month, but that's entirely up to them. But we do expect that there is quite a reasonable frequency of discussion. And so, the math would be that, okay, let's say you're performance managing 5 people at 2 hours a month, so there's 10 hours there. Sometimes people are struggling and they need more of your time, so add a few more extra hours there. And then we do have we call them annual reviews, but they're not. They're actually really more planning for the coming year. That takes prep work and actually having that planning session. That's probably another 5 or 6 hours for each person in February every year. And so all that to say, our performance managers play a variety of roles. Some of them definitely are still consultants and are on projects and have delivery accountabilities. So far, everyone's found a way to make it work without, I mean, nobody here puts in insanely long days. People understand there's a need for flexibility, so they have scheduled check-ins. Those get moved around as needed, but they still happen. And so people are still able to meet their delivery accountabilities, or if they have sales accountability, whatever other accountabilities, they're able to do that and still fit in this form of coaching. And we have had people who have said, you know what, it is too much. Can I drop the number of people, or I think I'm going to just step off of being performance manager for the next little while so I can really focus on some other accountabilities that I'm frankly more passionate about right now. So we try and keep it quite flexible, but we definitely try and cap the number of folks that people work with to something really reasonable so that it's not overwhelming.
Thank you. That concludes the formal questions. And as a wrap-up, Caterina, on behalf of our association, our members, and those listening today, thank you so much for your generous sharing of what's the secret sauce of career development, employee engagement as it lives within Habanero Consulting. Certainly your frameworks and models are all very accessible, they're replicable, and certainly and particularly the sort of the wise and insightful counsel around how career professionals can really position themselves with growing organizations such as yours to make the case for support for career development. We really need to be doing a better job of not just self-advocacy, but also in helping growing organizations like yours, which are a wonderful example of healthy workplaces. So thank you on behalf of our listeners today. Going forward, this is one in a number of a series of webinars and salons that ACP International will offer this year leading up to our conference in November. We have coming up, and this is an opportunity for you to save some dates. On Wednesday, June the 18th at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, Alan Gattenby from Australia will be doing a webinar on developing markets, particularly around his travels and experiences developing career services within India. So that's Wednesday, June 18th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. On Tuesday, August the 12th, also at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Alan will be doing another session, this time on culture, leadership, and innovation. So those are two coming up, Wednesday, June the 18th, and Tuesday, August the 12th. We're also very pleased to support our members who are publishing books and have new offerings. And so on Tuesday, September the 23rd, Ron Elsden, who many of you recall was featured in our webinar series last year, is releasing a new book called How to Build a Non-Traditional Career Path, Embracing Economic Disruption. And Ron will be sharing observations and highlights from that book, and that will be on Tuesday, September the 23rd at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And finally, those of you who know Annabelle Reitman, who is our blog coordinator and longtime Washington, D.C. member and leader, she has co-authored yet another book through formerly known as ASTD, now ATD. It's called Mentoring Partnerships Across the Generations in the Workplace. She's co-authored that with Sylvia Benatti. And Annabelle, we're just in discussions with Annabelle when she gets through with her promotion with the book, will be doing a webinar for us in the fall leading up to the conference. So we've got an exciting series coming up in terms of our salons webinars that is all in aim of advocating on behalf of the profession and working to provide really valuable professional development opportunities for our members and guests. For those of you who are interested more about the conference and promoting that, please go to our website, acpinternational.org, for more information. And we are very thrilled with the response so far for the pre-registration for the conference and with the feedback as well that we're getting from members and guests worldwide who are interested in attending this great celebration. So again, on behalf of our association, thank you, Caterina Sanders from Habanero Consulting, for your contribution today at the webinar. And for all our listeners today, thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to welcoming you to our next session.
Thanks very much, Heather. It was great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.